Switch games you regret buying. We never thought it'd be such a hot topic, but our video of our 7 Switch regrets saw 2,000 plus comments. There was insane response, and we wanted to look at what games you all regret. We've compiled that into this video, and now we present you with the list of Switch games you all regret buying. What's going on, everybody? It's Zach from Switch Force. Gabe is here, and while the end of the year includes a lot of best lists, a lot of favorites lists, one list that is interesting is Switch games you regret. And clearly, a lot of you have been thinking about this. Like I said, there was over 2,000 comments, and we've compiled a bunch of them, and kind of going to go through what the community feels are the collective most regretted Switch purchases.
Yes, and I hate that we're going to start with a game that we both kind of like a whole lot, but it's where we start.
Yeah, I have a ton of fun with this game. In fact, we made a video recently about 5 of our top Switch games, and this was on it, and I still think it's a lot of fun. It's one of the most enjoyable evenings I've had with the Switch is playing local multiplayer and battling it out. But the most popular comment involved ARMS, and we picked one from Aliusis Squirt, who says, I regret buying ARMS because that just got old fast, like anything trying to force motion controls. Now, I never played with motion controls, and I feel like that made ARMS a far more fun experience, but plenty of other people, as seen by the likes and the comments, the replies, had other issues with ARMS, lack of content, boredom, repetitive, not enough diversity. The list, unfortunately, goes on and on.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll say to defend this is it's a fighting game, right? And inherently fighting games are repetitive. And
right.
Yes, there's a lot to them, mechanic-wise and mastering certain movesets. But Street Fighter, it's still just the same matches, just like in ARMS. I guess the motion control thing people weren't a fan of, but like you, I didn't really play motion control very much. Although I do know people that, swear that motion control is the way to play. I don't regret buying ARMS, but I recognize that so many other people do.
Yeah, I think it was something that it just didn't click for some reason. Like, there are definitely a lot of strategies and different, mechanical nuances, and they've done a nice job of updating, right? There's been new characters, new stages, there's been mode additions and reworks and things like that, but it just didn't seem to hit. Another game that did not seem to hit with very many people was 1-2 Switch. Baoge Yobuki says, paying $50 for 1-2 Switch was the worst mistake I've ever made. It was just because the launch was so dry, and a lot of people agreed that 1-2 Switch was sort of one of those, okay, we need something else to play, but does not get mentioned really at all anymore.
Yeah, I didn't purchase it, so that's why I couldn't, mention it as one of mine. But if I had purchased it, it would absolutely, Zach, we played 1-2 Switch twice. That was about it. Like, with the videos we made, that's all we ever played of it. And
I played it at some time with family and friends, and I still feel like it can be a fun diversion. It is not a gamer's game, and given the Switch's, portability, that game does not travel well. It's something that really requires, a living room setting and a big TV. And I think I don't know. I think the idea is kind of kooky and clever, but again, something that just did not catch on. Had they gone with more of a Wii Sports style, I feel like that would have done better. And maybe if they had simpler games, less of them, and more refined versions, perhaps it would have been more of a mainstay. But at this point, yeah, 1-2 Switch is kind of something I feel like that has been completely swept under the rug.
A very common thing said about the game is that it should have been a pack-in, and I tend to agree. I think that would have been great.
Yeah. Adam Getty brings up a game that we actually discussed putting on our list, which is, where was Super Bomberman R? I thought it would make it since it was so lackluster. And again, this seemed to be a launch day filler. If you're a mega Bomberman fan, maybe, you've got your money's worth. It had a very strange single-player mode, but yeah, this did not do anything for me. I think we played it at launch and never again.
Yeah, and the problem with Super Bomberman R is I forgot about it. I didn't play it a whole lot. So when we were discussing for the list, this isn't one that I really cared to talk about very much because it wasn't a game I played. So a lot of the games that we chose, both of us played, and we both had experiences with it, and we both kind of felt disappointed, even though some of the games were not bad at all. They were actually good. But yeah,
right.
I think that was the case
it could
here.
be a timing issue as well. I think some of these games, you come out the same day as Breath of the Wild. That obviously sucked up everyone's attention, whereas a few of these come out, at a dry period. Maybe it makes a difference. But Ricardo Perez had one that I felt was a little... I thought we'd have something interesting to say about. He says, has been heroes, enough said. 123 people agreed. In hindsight, I did get quite a few solid hours out of that game. Did it live up to what we thought, which was like, this like close to launch, awesome new strategy roguelike? No, it didn't really, pan out that way. But I still I'm glad I played it. Is that weird to say?
I mean, I brought it up when we were discussing the list. This was a game that it wasn't what I hoped.
Yeah.
And I know it's a roguelike, so this is a lot to ask, but I thought like the art set was so cool, so I wanted like more story stuff, and the gameplay didn't do it for me. It never quite clicked. So this is 100% what I brought up. It just didn't make it onto the list.
I think if you pay $10 for it, it's still worth a couple hours of fun, because those first couple runs, yes, it does take a long time, and yes, when you lose and you don't make any progress, that's beyond frustrating. But those first couple runs are still pretty exciting. I feel like the gameplay mechanics are like kind of addictive for a while. I think $10, it's worth checking out.
Okay.
Captain Koopa says, I regret buying Fast RMX. It was super fun at first, and I loved playing online, but it got very repetitive, and eventually now nobody plays online. Would have rather spent that $20 on Stardew Valley or something else. Yeah, I think this is like, sort of that disappearing online community is something that has to factor in. And a game like Fast RMX that, was probably replaced by Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. We had fun with it at launch, but I think, again, it's just kind of like a timing thing. Maybe that comes out later. It has a little bit more room to breathe. But especially if the online community is dead, it's a tough one.
I like Fast RMX, so I don't subscribe to this train of thought. I enjoy the game for when I played with it. The online was a early example of, while not like perfect and maybe while not necessarily up to the standards of modern online communities and playing on consoles, it showed that the Switch was going to be no slouch. Like, we were able to find the matches quickly, and it ran perfectly fine. It's not like it was like a lag fest or anything like that. So yeah. I definitely don't regret Fast RMX. I liked it, but yeah, it's hard to play this when we have Mario Kart.
Sure. Spiracles brings up a really interesting idea, and I just want to throw this in there, even though I know most people are going to gasp when you hear this, but they say, and 28 people agree, I regret buying Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, because I'd already seen so much gameplay that playing the same stuff I've seen so many times just wasn't fun. I got to the Zora Divine Beast and lost interest. For me, the game felt very repetitive. I know almost no one else felt this way, but for me, I would rather play Mario Odyssey or Splatoon 2. I ended up trading Breath of the Wild for Pokemon Ultra Sun, which I do not regret doing. And I do think this is an interesting point of view. The fact that Zelda Breath of the Wild was so omnipresent, everyone played it, everyone posted videos, everyone talked about it. I could see getting the game late and feeling like all of that sense of wonder was kind of sucked away, and at that point, all of that sense of discovery vanishes, and maybe you do wish it was more of a linear game with more dungeons.
Yeah, I mean,
like overexposure almost.
Yeah, and there is a such thing. That's why I try to stay away from trailers and gameplay past a certain point. But I mean, the recurring thing here is this repetitive. The word repetitive keeps getting thrown around, and games are just by nature repetitive. There's gameplay loops, and that's what I mean. You play Call of Duty, right? Like, you go from one section to another, you're just pressing the trigger a whole lot, and yeah, you can boil down like any game to that. But yeah, it's interesting to me for that Zelda gets accused of being repetitive when there's like so much. Like, people play like hundreds of hours of that game.
Right. Obviously, personal preference and genre preference factors in.
Yes, I don't think like this comment is like egregious or anything. Like, yeah, like if he thought Zelda wasn't for him and he regrets it, that it's a valid opinion. It's not an opinion I share, but I'm not gonna throw water on it. I mean, yeah,
yeah, I mean, and it could be just a case. I think Last of Us suffered from this a little bit in terms of like everyone talks about that story, and so if you play that years late, you're like, I don't see the point. I've heard so much, like, whereas discovering Zelda, like, the first 20 hours I played pre-launch or 30 hours or whatever it was so enthralling. Even for me, once things were getting uncovered, once people sort of figured out the size of the game, the scope, the things you could do, I did lose, interest. And so I can see that it is a totally understandable point. Luca Cardoso 1 is your twin and says, I 100% regret buying Snake Pass. There's absolutely no reason to collect those crystals, and controlling Noodle is almost impossible. It just looks like a tech demo for the movement engine.
Yeah, Unreal Engine 4, one of the first showcases on Switch that the engine works well on it. So, it has that saving grace. But yeah, you guys know how I feel about Snake Pass. And I hate even like talking as bad as I do about the game because I know like people worked hard on it, and I'm sure the developers are awesome and all that. But yeah, the game's not for me.
Yeah, when we have we've talked about this one enough.
Yeah.
Anyhow. This is interesting. Psycho Nara Production says, while I don't regret buying it at all, I was disappointed in the lack of content for Splatoon 2 on launch day, and how it didn't really up the ante from the first game very much. While I know that's changing now, I don't like paying $60 for what feels more like early access to a game in a beta state. Now, I know that Splatoon 2 didn't reinvent the wheel, but I feel like the updates are not meant to make you feel like you got a lackluster product, but more keep the game alive. And I know that they have made some sweeping changes in terms of how things function and even, the lobby systems and things like that. But I never felt like Splatoon 2 was early access. I think Nintendo put together a pretty good product, and they just have a very consistent, schedule of keeping that very fresh.
There's a larger conversation here to be had, but this isn't the time for it. Unfortunately, a lot of these feelings that you might have, Psychonara, they're common, especially now. Like, people feel like we're getting games that are not complete, and then they're being completed post-launch with DLC and season passes, all of that. So that's just a big problem in the industry in general. Splatoon 2. If we want to get in that one, like I didn't play the original one a whole lot. I never played the campaign of the original one, so being able to play this one, to me, this did feel like a good sequel. But again, I think it's because of the lack of time I put into the original one. So if you played a lot of the first one, I could see how maybe this one, content wise, wasn't what you wanted. But again, I think it's a way bigger conversation. The updates to me are a good thing, and you look at it another way, and that's totally okay.
For sure. Yeah, I think we now are in a world where games are constantly updated, and you can look at that kind of as like a glass half full or glass half empty. But I wanted to bring that up. Next up, Andrew Broderick says, this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but Skyrim. I bought it, played it for a day, and returned it. I logged hundreds of hours into Skyrim when I got it on an Xbox 360, but after biting the bullet and paying $60 for it on Switch, I realized that I didn't have any interest in replaying it. I didn't really care for the look or style anymore, and found myself just wanting to keep playing Legend of Zelda. And I didn't see a lot of Skyrims, but I saw a lot of cases like this where people seem to be excited to have one of their favorites portable, and then once they got it, kind of were like, oh, it's not as exciting as I thought to replay this portably. And I wonder if over time, what side wins out? The people who are just so pumped to have a favorite game portable. We've heard the rumors of like Dark Souls 1. Like, does that make people super excited, or is it more a case of it's an exciting idea, but in execution, it's not that interesting?
Yeah, I mean, person by person basis, it depends on how your life is. If you're like in college, university, and you have time to kill between classes, like the portability of stuff, I'm sure helps. But for people like you and I, which we travel sometimes, you more than me, but I don't play portable. I mean, I do just for content wise, because I have to make the handheld videos and stuff like that. But if it wasn't for Switch Force, I don't know how much I would even use the Switch portably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it is going to be personal preference, but I am interested to see, as time goes on, how sort of the ports versus new, plays out. John K says something that we also mentioned, Gabe. It didn't get into the video, but it was off air. My biggest regret was NBA Playgrounds. I had a decent amount of fun with it, but the game was so poorly optimized for the console, I just can't bring myself to play it anymore. And especially after playing on PC and other platforms, we definitely felt this. It looks very trashy on Switch.
Yeah. And maybe if Switch is the only place you've played it, that kind of doesn't affect you as much. But, we played it first on PC. And, yeah, it looks way better, way sharper. The resolution on the Switch is just not good. The game itself still plays, like, perfectly fine.
It's not as good as NBA Jam, as well. That's definitely, like, it's not just the visuals.
No, of course. But, yeah, I had a decent time with it, so... Yeah, this wouldn't make it up to my list. I don't regret it, but yeah, I know a lot of
Poor Ports is something that was echoed a lot. Rachel Emma says the game I'm most disappointed with is Rime. It's a wonderful game, but it just doesn't work on Switch. The Switch is more than powerful enough to run the game, and yet somehow this port is incredibly glitchy. And we saw that with games like NBA Playgrounds across the board, where something just didn't go right in the development. And I hope that's a problem that we see fewer and fewer cases of as time goes on and as developers and the industry in general understands and embraces the Switch. I feel like that's coming. But yeah, Rime is an interesting one where it took forever to come out and still just wasn't up to snuff.
Yeah, a lot of like frame rate issues, like frame rates dropping into like the teens, like 15. Like it's a terrible port from what I've gathered. So yeah, it's not one that we would recommend at all.
Draven Downey says, I regret buying Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2. I never watched the show. I bought it on Black Friday. I immediately wanted to return it. I think that's a case of just, you got to be a fan of the material. But, when there is a sparse library, you can run into these cases where you're desperate to play something and you see something that looks interesting and it's just not for you. And there were definitely a lot of those cases where, especially earlier in the life cycle, maybe this doesn't apply to this specific case for Draven because it was Black Friday, but where people were desperate for a new game and they tried something and it just didn't work. And I think that's a common problem for year one of any new platform. But yeah, I mean,
I'll say this: saving grace, you got it cheap on Black Friday.
Yeah,
maybe trade it in. I'm sure you're not going to get a ton of credit for it or anything, but something.
Sell it on eBay.
Yeah.
That's my recommendation. Nicholas says, I regret getting Fast RMX Racing and Metal Slug. Fast RMX is fun with friends, but I basically never played on my own. Now that Mario Kart is out, we're probably never going to play it again. Also, I already have Metal Slug Anthology on Wii, so I don't know why I thought I needed it on Switch too. This brings up 2 points I thought were interesting. One, the idea of double dipping on Switch, and I wonder how long that is a valid, choice for people. And two, this idea that Nintendo kind of sets the bar and maybe other games of similar feel then don't live up. Fast RMX, Mario Kart, something like, this doesn't work because Ukulele got delayed so much, but like Ukulele and then Mario Odyssey. These instances where the Nintendo version is so superior that it kind of puts these other games to shame a bit, even if they are solid titles.
Yeah, I agree. And, we talked about Fast RMX already, so, don't have anything to say about the game there. But it's very difficult for any company to compete with Nintendo as far as similar games. And Metal Slug stuff, I don't touch it. So,
and I personally have regretted double dipping. I mean, I mentioned that with Binding of Isaac Afterbirth Plus on our list. I don't think that game is bad in any way. I don't think the port is bad in any way. It's just a case of I didn't need that, and I didn't need that for an extra cost. The fact that double dipping for cheap is one thing, but double dipping with a Switch tax, it's something that I will avoid doing in the future.
Yeah.
This is a ironic comment. Depression Obsession, who you think would be totally into this game, says, I got bored of Stardew Valley real fast, and I like Animal Crossing, so I don't know why I thought it was boring. This is interesting to me because it is a case of games that existed already, were mega hyped, and then people, get because, it's on Switch, and it was loved, and it just isn't for them.
I mean, to be clear, it's still for a lot of people on Switch.
Oh, for sure, for sure. There were a number of instances of people saying, like, I thought I don't like Sonic, but I got Sonic on Switch, didn't like it. Or like I don't like sim games, but I got this Stardew Valley and on Switch, I didn't like it. And I think the Switch's wonderful concept of being portable encourages players to try a lot of different things, and that is a beautiful. For the most part, a beautiful concept and a beautiful thing, but I do think it backfires sometimes. And I know it's backfired for us, Gabe, and it seems like it has backfired as well for some of the community.
Yeah.
The last one here, I just had to throw this in because I thought it was interesting. Shadow Raptor 101 says, well, I don't necessarily regret buying it. I felt a little let down by Super Mario Odyssey. It was advertised as being the next 64, Sunshine, Galaxy, but the levels are too small and don't offer much exploration. They tried to remedy this by cramming a moon in every corner of the game, but it ended up making them feel more like the Korok seeds from Breath of the Wild than the stars, shine sprites from past games. And while I don't regret or feel let down by Mario Odyssey, I totally can see this train of thought that it did bring a different progression style and just a different organizational style to the Mario franchise, and in some ways a more typical level structure or a more linear path and objective arrangement. We'll never know, but maybe it would have been more fun.
Yeah, I mean, I love Odyssey. I think it's a fantastic game. It's phenomenal. I don't share this. I do not regret it in any way. I don't want it to be exactly like the other games because then I could just go play the other games. So I like the differences, and yeah, maybe there's just way too many moons. Like 1,000 moons is a lot.
And we'll talk about this in our Game of the Year discussion, but I do think that Super Mario Odyssey is a culmination of lots of other styles of Mario, and I feel that the team wanted to wow with diversity and interesting new ideas rather than continuing to iterate on the same concepts and the same ice world, sand worlds, and obviously those are in there, but they're done in ways that are fresh, I feel, as opposed to just being like, World 3 is, again, the lava world, and World 4 has this, like, how many times can you do that? And I think some people just wanted that again, and I was one of them, but after playing Odyssey, I didn't regret it. But yeah, a lot of interesting regrets, and we don't want to dwell too much on the negative. We will be bringing sort of the opposite end of the spectrum in games that we love most, and your games that you love most, and covering those in the future. But we did want to touch on a lot of these because I think it's an interesting conversation, and it's illuminating to see how you guys feel about stuff. We love doing that, and if you enjoyed this video and want to have more of these sort of two-parters, our take and then your take, let us know. We hope that you're having a fantastic day, and we hope you're finding some Switch games that you don't regret. I'm sure you are, and we will keep you up to date on all the latest and greatest games that we all know we will love, and games that maybe you'll regret in the future. Until that time, everybody, thanks so much for watching. A fantastic day for myself and Sick Gabe. Switch